Well, as part of the commemorative events marking the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the General Assembly is holding a meeting to observe UN Day. Let's take you straight there now.
And our personnel around the globe have proved able and willing. I say to the United Nations personnel globally, we commend you and we thank you. Your vigilance, collegiality, spirit of cooperation, and your commitment to the principles of the United Nations have shaped and continue to shape the lives of millions. On that note, I look forward to the panel discussion and to hearing the testimonials from staff, particularly on their vision for the world we want and the future of the United Nations at 75. Thank you very much. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to make a statement.
President of the General Assembly, Mr. President of the Security Council, Excellencies, colleagues and friends. 75 years ago, amid the rubble and ruin of the Second World War, world leaders did the audacious. Many previous attempts to secure peace and progress through international cooperation had collapsed. Yet they dared to try again, and they succeeded. The drafters of our founding charter placed new faith in shared values, collective security, and the rule of law. At its birth, the United Nations was a symbol of global unity, and today it is the epicenter. Our mission is more important than ever, preventing conflict and promoting sustainable and inclusive development, upholding human rights and advancing justice, improving living standards, protecting our planet, and ensuring the equal rights of women and men. That is what people across the globe are seeking from their leaders. We can fulfill these ambitions by working together. International cooperation is the only way to defeat the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate emergency, the rising inequality, and the spreading of hatred. At this time of such colossal challenge, I welcome the General Assembly's declaration of commitment to reinvigorate multilateralism. The Assembly has invited me to assess how to advance our common agenda, and I have already set in motion what will be an important process of reflection. I look forward to an inclusive and insightful effort that will strengthen global governance and how the world responds to current and future challenges. We will build on the achievements of the United Nations across its history. And we can be inspired by the conversation we conducted this year to mark the milestone, and which took a revealing snapshot of our world in 2020 and gave voice to the hopes and ideas of people across the globe. Excellencies, we measure the success of the United Nations by the lives we save, the suffering we ease, the peace we build, the opportunities we create, and the rights we protect. The women and men of the United Nations strive to bring that work to life around the clock and around the world. I'm inspired every day by the talent and dedication of the UN personnel from headquarters to the field, as you, Mr. President, have just underlined. Today, we will hear directly from them. They show the spirit of the United Nations, the spirit of service for the common good. That spirit has fueled us for 75 years and will guide us through the pandemic and beyond. We will never, ever give up in our mission and in our work to fulfill the enduring vision of the Charter. Thank you very much.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Vasily Nebenzia, Permanent Representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations and President of the Security Council for the month of October, to make a statement. Well done, Secretary.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Security Council in my capacity as President of this body for the month of October. 75 years ago, the Charter of the United Nations came into force and this organization was born. As it is outlined in the UN 75 Declaration, there is no other global organization with the legitimacy, convening power, and normative impact of the United Nations. No other global organization gives hope to so many people for a better world. Even in times of great global challenges and tension, our organization has catalyzed decolonization, helped to mitigate dozens of conflicts, saved hundreds of thousands of lives, promoted human rights and fundamental freedoms, shaped norms for international development, and worked to eradicate disease. We should be proud of all those who have contributed to the UN success, and we should remember those UN personnel who made their ultimate sacrifice. It is evident that we still have a long distance to travel before the vision of the UN Charter becomes a reality. Together, we must work to end the senseless conflicts and violence that disrupt development, displace millions, and destroy thousands of lives. We must concentrate on the international development delivering now on the 2030 agenda. We must meet our commitments to uphold human rights. Our world is still facing a myriad of challenges, from terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction to poverty, hunger, growing inequality, and human rights violations. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to reverberate around the globe. This massive challenge requires a strong multilateral system and more cooperation and solidarity among nations. In this regard, we commend the Secretary General's leadership in coordinating the UN system to fight pandemic and prepare for the recovery, and we welcome his call for a global ceasefire. As we mark this historic anniversary, we have every reason to celebrate all that we have accomplished as community of nations over the last 75 years. We also need to build on our collective achievements and learn from our shortcomings in order to live up to the promises of the founders of the United Nations. Today, the Security Council reaffirms its commitment to the Charter of the United Nations, including the purposes and principles of the Charter, and the international order based on international law, which is the indispensable foundation of a more peaceful, prosperous, and just world, for peaceful coexistence and for cooperation among states in addressing threats to international peace and security. In this connection, the Council reaffirms its commitment to multilateralism and the central role of the United Nations. The Security Council reaffirms its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security under the Charter of the United Nations, and in this context underscores the need for all states and international and regional organizations and others to have respect for the Charter. We have a common duty to both protect, preserve, and increase its legitimacy. And we must do all we can to move ever closer to the world of peace, justice, human rights, and prosperity envisaged 75 years ago. I thank you.
I thank the President of the Security Council for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Colin Kelapile, Permanent Representative of Botswana to the United Nations and Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, to make a statement on behalf of the President of the Council.
President of the General Assembly, President of the Security Council, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to deliver these remarks on behalf of the President of the Economic and Social Council, Ecosoc, His Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram, who sends his sincere regrets for not being able to join personally at this important event. We commemorate today the entry into force on 24 October 1945 of one of the most meaningful and revered documents in world history, the Charter of the United Nations. The UN was indeed established to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, as well as to promote better standards of life in larger freedoms. The fundamental principles and values of the Charter have served as the firm foundation of the post-1945 world order. Against all odds, since the founding of the United Nations, our nations have avoided another global conflict and the related devastating suffering. But we could have never anticipated that 75 years after the signing of the Charter, we would be fighting a global enemy that has transcended borders, reached all levels of society, and upended our lives with frightening speed. The COVID-19 pandemic is the greatest challenge we are facing as the international community since the creation of the United Nations. The pandemic has touched us as human beings, and it has shown us how intimately connected the world is. The response and recovery approaches need to be based on a robust and committed global solidarity and cooperation. They must be guided by the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. President, Excellencies, the Charter of the United Nations not only cemented principles and values, but also established the dedicated intergovernmental bodies to facilitate the related policy discussions, actions, and decisions. One of those charter-based principal organs is Ecosoc. Since its first meeting in January 1946 in London, the Council has served as a central platform of the UN for promoting economic and social progress. With the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Ecosoc deepened its focus on promoting a coherent and coordinated UN system support to member states in delivery of sustainable development. As we entered the decade of action and delivery, the Council has added a strong sense of urgency in achieving the SDGs by 2030. The High-Level Political Forum for Sustainable Development, HLPF, the core UN platform for following up on the 2030 Agenda, now meets under the auspices of Ecosoc. As the world is confronted with the twin major crises of recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic and avoiding a climate catastrophe while simultaneously seeking to realize the SDGs, it is without a shadow of doubt that Ecosoc's mandate is more indispensable today than ever before. The Council needs to continue to promote integrated approaches to sustainable development policies, identify solutions to our pressing challenges, effect transformative change, galvanize peer learning and support, as well as coordinate unprecedented levels of international cooperation to realize our common goals. Let us be inspired by what we have achieved to date with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These important agreements remain our best hope for surmounting today's multiple crises and building resilience. It is therefore encouraging to note that despite the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, in July this year at the HLPF, as many as 47 countries reviewed their achievements and challenges in realizing the Agenda 2030. This continuing commitment to the UN's shared vision for transforming the world is a cause for optimism. Today, 168 countries have undertaken voluntary national reviews, several for a second and third time over the last 5 years. Mr. President, Excellencies, As we renew our commitment to the Charter of the UN, let us be clear about what we want this organization to be. If we all remain true to the common pledge that we made in 2015 of leaving no one behind, and that we should reach the furthest behind first, let us equip the UN to do just that. A UN fit for the purpose that we agreed to in 2015 should not be starved of the resources and capacities it requires to fulfill its mandate across the three pillars of peace, development, and human rights. Let us therefore properly use the occasion of this 75th anniversary of the UN to recommit to international solidarity and cooperation in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating impact. Let us today also agree to support the kind of response that will put us back on track to realize the SDGs during the decade of action and delivery. I wish to conclude by reassuring you that the Ecosoc is an essential pillar of multilateralism. It is more than ready to play its part to tackle the pressing challenges today and tomorrow. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement. I now invite members to view a video presentation entitled Inheritance, featuring a performance by Miss Eleanor Wikstrom, a youth poet laureate, filmed at the Herbst Theater in San Francisco, the place where the charter was signed in 1945.
All right, that is the UN commemorative event as they celebrate 75 years there of the UN. And really the theme quite the same from all the speakers this afternoon, saying, you know, they continue with their commitment to uphold human rights, and also the calls for global ceasefire really being supported and pushed by the UN, and it being said that this should and definitely must be achieved. Let's take a short break. More news after this.